A video came up in my Facebook memories last week from February 2nd, 2021. In the video, I'm walking in the path in the woods behind my parents' house in rural Newfoundland. And my then 2-year-old, Mathilde, is on my shoulders. And with her mittened hand, she brushes snow off a tree branch. And she says, "Another tree!" And I walk to another branch, and she brushes off that branch too. And then I look at the camera and I say, "We're making this video for Daddy. Can you say hi to Daddy?" "Hi, Daddy," she cheerfully complies. Nearly 11 months since COVID-19 pandemic shut the world as we know it down, Mathilde knows that these daily videos to Daddy are part of our routine. Daddy is stuck in New York City. When I met him, Zachary, nearly 10 years ago, we agreed that we were worth managing the distance between New York City and Montreal. We both had secure unionized jobs in our respective cities. We had older children who were in shared custody arrangements. And when we chose to have Mathilde, it was with the understanding that her big sisters would be graduated high school by the time she started school, and that's when we could be together. I had raised other children alone, and so I thought that I could manage with Quebec's daycare system and regular visits and support from him. Mathilde had just learned to walk when the schools and the daycares and everything shut down in March of 2020. I have photos and videos of her toddling around the Brooklyn Museum a couple weeks beforehand in our last visit to New York City. She turned 2 years old, which is when they say memory starts, with her father a face on my phone screen. Live on WhatsApp, he watched her blow out the 2 candles on her bunny cake. And I took a screenshot because I wanted to have a document of his presence there, however virtual it was. I knew that she had no recollection of the before times. Daycare in Montreal, other children her age, going to the public library and the swimming pool on Sundays, taking the Amtrak to New York City, and having her father drive up to visit us regularly. For the first several months of the pandemic, I was utterly alone at home with my children. I couldn't even go for short walks because Mathilde was so curious and she wanted to touch every single discarded mask and discarded glove. Remember gloves? So it was a bundle of anxiety, and so our world was our home in our backyard, and thankfully the trampoline in it. When the daycares opened in the fall of 2020, I wasn't ready to take the risk, and so I kept her home with me. And I taught classes online with her in my arms, mostly sleeping, breastfeeding a lot just off the camera. And one time she woke up in the middle of a class, and she looked up at the screen of 40 black squares and 3 brave students, thank you students, who had their cameras on, and she said, "Where's Daddy?" And I lost my train of thought, and I had to end class early. I needed the support of my family, and I was on a mental health leave at this point for depression that HR insisted I needed to take antidepressants for, when seriously it was just the circumstances that I was in that made me very depressed. And so I applied to enter a very restricted Newfoundland, which is where I'm from, to go and stay with my parents for a bit. And their home was a refuge. My father was so excited to have us back, and he cooked meals and cleaned and did so many of the things that I had been just doing relentlessly for ages all by myself. And they live right in the middle of Grossmore National Park. And so I snowshoed trails because my parents could look after the children. And I would walk the 2 hours to the local lighthouse. And I would go and watch the sunset at Salmon Point, which is this beautiful spot just 10 minutes away from my parents' home. And I would read my New Yorker magazine that would come like 3 weeks late because postal is difficult out there. And I would tell Zachary about the art shows that I wanted him to go see on my behalf in New York City. And he would go, and to make himself more tangible to us, he would send us parcels. That's really where the parcels started, was the art shows and the museum stores. And he would mail Mathilde like board books of palettes where she would learn her colors from the Met Museum, and a wooden ancient Egypt puzzle that I had bought her on her last trip to the Brooklyn Museum. And for me and the older kids, there was a pepperoni pizza slice, classic New York piece, for us to assemble together. Her favorite toy, of course, was a very gaudy, light-up spinning top from Chinatown that her father had bought from a street vendor for like $5. But you basically had like a little pump, and you would put it on the floor, and it would be like, and it had all these lights that would go all over the floor. And so she was really excited to show this to Daddy on the phone. And she's like, look what I got. Look what Mommy brought home today. And he's like, I know, I sent it to you. It's from me. So after several more months or a couple months and a lot of paperwork and COVID testing, Zachary finally was cleared to visit us in person in Newfoundland of late February 2021. And I thought that Mathilde would recognize Daddy from the phone, but that was out of context for her. And so because her only reference for an in-person, middle-aged, bearded man was my brother, her Uncle Stephen, the first 3 days she called her daddy Other Stephen. We laughed as you did, but I got a pain in my chest every time she said it, those first couple times. But after several nights of stories together and cuddles and painting, she came to know the concept of Daddy beyond the phone screen. And she would call him Daddy, even if it was to say, Daddy sleeps in my bed, I sleep with Mama, like always. She said that like literally last weekend. That's her thing. She likes that. On the second last night of his visit, we were lying in bed, and I was reading my New Yorker magazine. It was like such a rare pleasure to just lie next to your partner in bed reading a magazine. And Mathilde was nestled between us. And she pointed to an ad for Zabar's, which is the famous Jewish bakery in New York. And she pointed to a babka. She goes, I want that. And because she was a toddler, she added, right now. And her father said, honey, Daddy is going back to New York. It is the land of babka and Zabar's. When I see you next, I'm going to bring you a babka. And she might have had no concept of time, or we didn't even know when it would be, but it was going to happen. So fast forward to June, and we are newly back in Montreal, and he is on the eve of his next visit. And on the WhatsApp video call, he holds up the cinnamon babka. She thinks it's the superior babka. That's her favorite cinnamon. She throws a tantrum because she wants him to hand it to her through the phone right now. And I'm just grateful enough that after all that time of Daddy being a face on the phone screen, she believes it possible that he could reach through. And this time she only has to wait one more day because Daddy's coming the next day and bringing her the babka. And so, as COVID restrictions eased up a bit, he's been able to come more often, and we've basically resumed our pre-pandemic travel, and the Amtrak is due back between April and June of this year. And we've managed to go to New York, and Mathilde has made memories there. She calls Daddy's building the museum. The doorman is like the attendant. We've been able to kind of regained some sense of normalcy. And now we are actually closer to living together than we are to, time-wise, to the worst part of the pandemic. At least theoretically. Now I'm really worried about immigration. But in the meantime, we do have WhatsApp calls and frequent Daddy Babka deliveries to get us through. Thank you.